Hello and welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is American Ben. Great news, this is not our last Strongest Aliens video. Due to your multiple requests and constant harassment, we've thrown a few more in there. So listen up, you damn lazy apes, because the war preparation continues. Sorry for the bluntness, but remember, rule number one for running an empire, when the Zerg are a topic of conversation, the niceties go out the window. Yup, we're touching on StarCraft today. Sorry I can't do the Protoss. Yeah, they're strong and intelligent, but they're just such whiny know-it-alls. It's like, get over yourselves. By the end of a conversation/lecture with a Protoss, I find myself longing for a Zerg Hydralisk to slice my ears off with its scythes. That said, the Zerg are still repugnant, biologically advanced arthropodal aliens. They are nature in all her fury. And before you get mad at me for gendering nature feminine, listen, we men get God. Let's give the women thunderstorms. Anyway, if you enjoy the video, remember to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Let's start with the advantages. To truly understand the Zerg, one needs to understand their mentality, which starts with the Overmind, a Zerg created by the malevolent Xel'Naga to bring order to the Zerg. The Overmind is the product of the collective sentience of the Zerg swarm that since its creation has developed its own sentience and personality. But the Overmind, despite having its own intellect, has one directive, and that is to guide the Zerg swarm to perfection. Thus, the pursuit of perfection is deeply embedded in the Zerg psyche. Perfection is their religion. And thus, every thought the Zerg have and every action they take has to do with this one goal, their improvement. The result is a Zerg swarm that acts collectively in the best interests of the entire group. They aren't wasteful, they don't pursue unnecessary goals, and they constantly strive to get stronger. Before we really dig deep into the Zerg's flaws and advantages, we need to first talk about their genetics. Before a Zerg hatches at birth, it has two cell types, one which creates random mutations and another that hunts these mutations. The result of this is that the only mutations that survive are the strongest ones of all, a Darwinistic process. And the Zerg that emerges is one that is biologically designed to be a perfect specimen. This genetic process also means that there are many different strains of Zerg and a lot of diversity in terms of traits and skills. Not only do the Zerg have a special genetic makeup, but they seem to understand the principles of evolution as well. They purposely situate themselves in harsh climates in order to further their own evolution through natural selection. Only the strongest or the ones with the best mutations survive. Throughout most of their history, they've also only assimilated the strongest species into their flood. At first glance, one might assume that the Zerg are nothing more than a mindless swarm, because alien races similar to them often are. Though not much is known about Zerg intellect, they do seem to be a fairly cunning and capable species, at least in the collective sense. The Zerg are capable of higher reasoning and thinking in general. We've already talked about their understanding of the principles of evolution, but they also can understand technology even if they don't have much of their own, and they also don't just rely on numbers alone for success in warfare. They study their enemies and adapt accordingly. They react to what works and what doesn't and engage in tactical planning, which includes executing ambushes and stealth operations. Sure, much of the Zerg's thinking is directed by the Overmind and the higher level strains below it, but such a system seems to have been successful in cultivating a swarm that is smarter than its individual parts. The Zerg, due to the genetics and adaptation we've discussed, are a highly tough and resilient species. They've evolved to shed all of their non-essential components, though I would argue that would include their alien component, and are only made up of parts and traits suited for fighting. They may lack technology, but their natural armor and weapons are equivalent to what modern Terran technology can create in terms of strength and protection. All Zerg can survive in a variety of harsh climates and some even in space, and the ones that can't are often still much less dependent on oxygen than other organic beings. They are also highly resilient to chemical agents. The Zerg, like many swarm-based alien races, are hard to stop and expand quickly. They can proliferate rapidly and thus are able to produce an enormous army. And while they do have intelligent tactics, that's not to say they don't rely heavily on numbers to overwhelm enemies. Since the Zerg's purpose is perfection, they need to conquer worlds and other species in order to continue advancing towards flawlessness. Since a large population is another essential component of a successful space army, they thus create the requisite spawning centers to produce the necessary numbers for conquest. Furthermore, the Zerg do have to eat and rest, but not to any significant extent. The Zerg also do not die of old age, which means unless they are killed, they continue fighting. As we just said, the Zerg do have to eat and gain nutrients from consuming other creatures. But in general, they don't worry much about sustaining themselves with food because they gain nutrients from something called the creep. The creep is a living psionic superorganism that nourishes the Zerg. But beyond that, the creep sustains all Zerg structures. There is a biological makeup to the Zerg where everything is connected and their structures are like organs. The creep then pumps nourishment to everything, whatever is required. The creep upholds Zerg society in real time, giving Zerg structures the ability to adapt in combat and harden their shells. One unique ability that most Zerg strains have is the ability to dig through almost any surface. The Zerg have tiny muscles which vibrate at a low frequency, grinding dirt and stone as a Zerg unit moves. Zerg often use this ability to burrow underground and swim under the surface of planets. This trait makes the Zerg exponentially more deadly, as they can move around an environment virtually unseen and ambush enemies. Foes can be alone at one moment and surrounded by the Zerg the next. If the Zerg are on a planet for long enough, especially during extended conflicts, they will most likely have developed a massive underground transit system which they can traverse at high speed, affording the Zerg an incredible advantage in controlling battles and outmaneuvering opponents. Which, sorry for making this personal, is why we should enslave them and make them fix the NYC subway system, though that's probably already run by aliens. The Zerg also have regenerative capabilities. They have special alpha amino acids in their chemical makeup that allow dead cell matter to combine with proteins to create new cells. There is no limit to the Zerg's ability to regenerate. They can do so from any state and seemingly an infinite amount of times. Zerg units can recover even from the most devastating of injuries. This of course means that even if a single Zerg unit survives a battle, the entire colony can be recovered. This is why, my friends, you must remember General Rasmus Jurgardens, hero of humanity, whose words from the battlefield are memorialized in the Humanity First codebook. "I've known intimacy with many women, but the best love I ever made was to Exterminatus. I remember the feeling of her bosom on my face, the cannons from which force burst the milk of human devastation." Finally, we have the Leviathan, seemingly a ship and thus Zerg technology. But while the Leviathan is the equivalent of a capital ship in most space navies, it is actually a living Zerg itself, an airborne breed to be specific. Leviathans are about 4.2 miles long, or about pepperoni pizza kilometers. They are capable of faster than light travel and at the same time can fly within atmospheres and land on planets. Leviathans can operate, as many Zerg breeds can, in all sorts of harsh conditions. They are heavily armed with an array of bioweapons and giant tentacles that can grab or destroy other ships or aircraft. Leviathans can also launch bile swarms and bioplasmid charges at their targets to devastating effect. Inside the ship is housed evolution chambers, which can hold thousands of Zerg strains. An entire army of mutalisks and broodlords can be created within a single Leviathan. Okay, let's get to the flaws of these worms. After all, they have no backbone. No, literally, they're invertebrates. So they don't have a backbone. Control is of the utmost importance for keeping the Zerg in order. The Overmind keeps the Zerg in line, and thus they are an aggressive but tactical force. But any slip on that control, and Zerg units will resort to their more savage natures, attacking anything in their path without thinking, and this includes other Zerg. There exists Feral Zerg and Primal Zerg that aren't connected to the hive mind, and they are much more crude beasts. The swarm might be organized, but their entire army runs the risk of turning into feral beasts should the hive mind collapse. We've already mentioned some of the advantage the Zerg have that make up for their lack of technology. But still, not having much tech always means that the Zerg run the risk of having their weapons, armor, and ships, which are produced and evolved biologically, fall behind the ever-increasing power of synthetic technology. Their lack of technology also makes it so the Zerg, while proficient at conquest, aren't as capable of holding and maintaining territory. I should say this is partly because of the lack of technology, and partly because they're worms. Overall, synthetic technology always seems to eventually outpace what biology can produce, and thus the Zerg always face the possibility of becoming inferior. Many alien races feature creatures that can easily rip enemies to shreds while also being nearly indestructible. However, while the Zerg might have a lot of biological traits that make them deadly on the battlefield, including strong natural armoring and weaponry, overall the individual Zerg unit isn't that powerful. The Zerg are really only an imposing force as a collective, but individually they're not as intimidating. In one-on-one battles, Zerg are not that difficult for Protoss and Terrans to kill. Finally, very simply, while their biology affords the Zerg many strengths, including an ability to survive in harsh environments, absorb damage, and resist chemical agents, the Zerg are vulnerable to radiation. Concentrated radiation doses are a known way to wipe out the Zerg. Okay everybody, it's time to vote for the Zerg. Please click right up there to rate them on a scale of 1 to 5. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. You can leave a comment down below as well, letting me know what you think of the Zerg. For now, my name is American Ben, and I'll catch you next time. Generation Films, peace.